Hello, Lions fans. This is Jeff Risdon from the Detroit Lions podcast and Lions Wire, doing a little bit of a solo project today. Chris and I cannot be together this week. They do logistical things. He's traveling. Chris did do a video on his own breaking down the TJ Hockenson trade. So I'm going to do my own, and I'm going to focus a little bit more on Aubrey Pleasant and also the game that we all witnessed that I had to watch more than once, unfortunately, against Miami over the weekend, and clear up a couple other things too. So with that, let's do it. A lot has happened since we last talked to you. I'm recording this Wednesday afternoon, and so far nothing else traumatic has happened. Monday we saw a coach get fired, Aubrey Pleasant. Is no longer the defensive backs coach or passing game coordinator for the Detroit Lions. He was relieved of his duties. Tuesday was the trade deadline. We had TJ Hockenson go bye-bye. He's in Minnesota now. Again, I strongly encourage you to watch Chris's breakdown on that. He has a little bit more inside information on that than I do. I will just tell you on that front, it wasn't unexpected. I do like the fact that they made the trade. And the thing that I keep coming back to, this is a very similar situation to what the Lions were in with Eric Ebron a few years ago. When Ebron went into his fifth season, the Lions had exercised the fifth-year option on his contract, as they had done with Hawkinson here. And Bob Quinn didn't trade him, didn't extend him, didn't let it play out to get a comp pick. He just cut him. One of the dumbest freaking things I've ever seen a GM do, but that's why he's not employed now. I will applaud Brad Holmes for getting what he got for TJ Hockenson with that backdrop in mind. Again, they got literally nothing for Eric Ebron other than addition by subtraction for him going. And, oh, by the way, that is one of the reasons why they overpaid to bring in Jesse James and screwed up the tight end situation for a long time, which is why they had to draft TJ Hockenson in the first place. I know a lot of you were very upset when that happened. That's Bob Quinn creating his own mess and then exacerbating it. I like what Brad Holmes did here in extricating himself from a situation that was only going to get stickier with Hockenson. Look, he was due $9.4 million next year. That's higher than I would want to give him, but it's commensurate with his talent level. But for a guy who was the number 4, number 5 target almost every week, you just can't pay that much. And paying him the money that he wants and wants this offseason, the 15, 16, 17 million, all those numbers have been thrown out there. I don't know what he's going to get. It's not our problem anymore. It's Minnesota's problem. And by the way, that's a very big problem for Minnesota. They don't have the cap room to make that sort of stuff work without doing some creative things. They can get it done, and I do think that Hockenson makes them better, especially with their regular tight end, Irv Smith, being out for perhaps the rest of the season. Look, they're shooting for a Super Bowl. This is the move that they made to try to make it happen. I wish him well. I liked Hawk. Thought he was a good dude. Enjoyed, the time with him. He was always very open and congenial to the media. Pretty straightforward guy, a guy that you knew whether he was putting you on or not. I like that. Good player. Not a great player, but a good player. The Lions have made the decision not to overpay for good. I like that. You should like that too. Does it hurt that he's gone? Yeah. One quick thing, and this is something that came up in the Patreon Slack here on the podcast channel. By the way, it is the best $5 per month you can spend. It gets you exclusive access to a lot of behind-the-scenes stuff. Chris and I drop some dust in there every now and then about what's going on with the team that might not get out publicly. And it's a good way to keep up and make a lot of good friends, too. I've made some great contacts and people who keep me sane on crazy weeks like this where there are times where I just want to throw fireballs at the world. Y'all help me out on that, so thank you. So again, go to the Patreon Slack, join it. It's $5 a month. It's well worth it. The big thing is where are they going to go to replace TJ Hockenson and the production he had, which is on average 4 catches for 44 yards a week. Brock Wright can do that. He might not do it with as much panache as what Hockenson does, or as much yards after the catch flair from what we've seen from Hawk this year. And he's not as good of a blocker, but he is, believe it or not, he really is improving at his blocking. That's more a sign of how bad it was as an undrafted rookie out of Notre Dame last year. But progress is progress. You saw James Mitchell play early in the game against Miami. He caught his first NFL pass on a play on the first drive down in the red zone. Looked very good at doing it too. Held his block, made it look like he was going to stay in as a blocker, then chipped out nicely and then released out and caught a nice designed roll-out pass from Goff. He can do that, and I'm curious to see how much more they use him. Look, are they going to miss Hawkinson and his high-end ability at tight end? Absolutely. Was it something that they have to have or can't live without? Absolutely not. Brock Wright, James Mitchell. Keep in mind they have veteran Garrett Griffin on the practice squad. He might actually be signed to the active roster by the time you watch this. That's going to be the move from everything that I've been understood anyways. So they have that. He's a blocking tight end. He's an inline blocking tight end. That was not Hawkinson's strength. Then you've also got Shane Zylstra, who played earlier this season, sort of as the H-back. Didn't play a lot. He's also on the practice squad. So they have a baseline of options in-house. They don't have to go out shopping for some tight end off the street. They do have some continuity there. So I from that standpoint, look, they're not losing the game. They're not losing games because TJ Hockenson wasn't doing enough, and they're not going to lose games in the future because the tight end position isn't doing enough. There are many other bigger fish to fry. I'm very happy getting the second-round pick this coming year. That gives us 5 draft picks in the first 64. Technically, it's 65 picks, but Miami cheated. They forfeited their first-round pick, so Detroit's first pick of the second round is actually number 32, and the first pick of the third round is now number 64, even though it's listed as 33 and 65, just to keep people who do mock drafts like me, keep them sane. So where are we going to go in the draft? You know what? I'm going to get to the draft some other time. I am going to do a mock draft. It will be up at Lions Wire probably Friday morning. I had promised people in the Patreon Slack on the mock draft channel that I would have it done earlier. Life interfered. The Hawkinson trade interfered. There some various other things that have come up have just pushed that back. I wound up getting delayed on the film review. By the way, I did this week's spotlight on Kirby Joseph, and I was very, very happy. And that's actually a good transition point here. So let's talk about what we saw. What we saw Sunday. Why Aubrey Pleasant is no longer employed as the passing game coordinator and defensive backs coach of the Detroit Lions. After Sunday, it was very well deserved. And I'm going to preface all of the negativity directed here at Pleasant and Aaron Glenn and the secondary in general by making a couple of quick points. Number 1, Jeff Okudah was targeted once. Was where he was the primary person in coverage on either Tyreek Hill or Jalen Waddle all day. Tua picked on everybody when they were in zone, and there were situations where Okudah was in zone and didn't necessarily do his job great either. But the other one, Kirby Joseph played really, really well after the first drive. He got beat a couple of times where he did it. So if you're familiar with what I do a film breakdown spotlight every week on a particular defensive player or just Lions player. I've done Josh Paschal, his first game. I've done Aiden Hutchinson, done Rodrigo, did Okudah back in week 1. This week I focused on Kirby Joseph, and he played pretty darn well. He earned a lot more pluses than minuses. I believe it was 14 to 5 was the final tally. Forced a fumble, made a lot of good plays, showed a lot of promise, and one of the things that really stood out in watching the All-22 film, he never takes a false step. Like, he's just not a guy who's going to run himself out of plays. After years of watching Will Harris do that and watching various other people do that, it's so refreshing to see a guy who doesn't instantly step out of the play where he's supposed to be. And that's a very, you can work with that. Brian Duker, who is the new defensive backs coach, can work with that and has been working with that, and is one of the reasons why we're seeing that from Kirby Joseph. And one of the reasons why he got promoted to take over for Aubrey Pleasant was because Brian Duker has done a pretty good job with the safety crew. He really has. He has the primary issues with the Lions in coverage are, well, there's 2. One, they're not getting pass rush fast enough. Although against Tua, that's a little complicated because he gets the ball out quicker than almost any other quarterback. And if you're not getting that instant pressure on him, you probably want to have your guys back. So I understand that one. But the cornerback play, specifically the slot corner play, all season has just been awful, whether it's been Mike Hughes, Will Harris, this past week, A.J. Parker. A.J. Parker showed you on Sunday why he got cut at the end of the preseason. He doesn't need to be out there. Look, I know he was a feel-good story as an undrafted rookie last year. Played well at times, but those times are over. He looks completely slow, lost, tentative. None of those are qualities that you want from a guy who's playing a critical role on your defense, and you just can't have that. Amani Oruwariye, he does not have speed. He does not have the instinctual reactions either to compensate for it. When you're playing a guy against Tyreek Hill or Jalen Waddle, guys who can fly, 4.29, 4.35 guys in the 40. Amani is a 4.45 guy, but he's not getting there right away. Like he needs a little bit of buildup. He doesn't have that instant acceleration. He also doesn't have I don't want to say cognitive quickness because that makes it sound like he's dumb, and he's not a dumb guy at all. But I don't think that he trusts the eyes fast enough, if that makes any sense. Like, he needs to see it and process it for just a click before he reacts on it. And when you don't have the speed, that's not good enough. And we saw that a lot. We saw a lot of that on Sunday, folks. So, a lot also, and this ties into why Aubrey Pleasant is no longer employed, the missed assignments. MAs, as Dan Campbell calls them. If you hear his press conferences, he talks about MAs. He just refers to them that. He's talking about missed assignments, and those are not physical breakdowns. Those are mental reps that are missed. That is A.J. Parker as an example. Turning Jalen Waddle loose when he doesn't understand that the safety is bracketing Tyreek Hill on the other side, as Kirby Joseph was on the first touchdown pass, the second touchdown pass, rather, to Waddle, where he did the little waddle in the end zone after that. He thought he was going to have over-the-top help, but the play dictates, and the coverage that they were in dictated that he wouldn't. He didn't understand that, and he got burned, and they gave up a touchdown for it. And in a game where they lost by 4 points, that can't happen, and it kept happening. There were plays where it looked like Amani thought that they were in man, and they were supposed to be in zone. There were plays where Okudah looked like he thought that they were going to be in zone, and they were actually in man. Fortunately, Tua didn't look his way on those plays because the other guys were just as inept doing what they were supposed to be doing. It was rough, man. And that kind of stuff, it litters the game film every week. There's a reason why the Lions are dead last by a pretty considerable margin in every single defensive metric. Pass defense specifically. They don't get a lot of quick pressure. They need to blitz to do it, and by the way, they did blitz fairly successfully against Miami. They just didn't do it enough. You're going to need more from Josh Paschal, from Aiden Hutchinson. Hutchinson, I thought, played okay. He was held and double-teamed repeatedly. I'm not going to complain at all about the refs because they call... Anytime your opponent gets called for 12 pre-snap penalties and you lose the game, that's execution. That's not an officiating problem. That's an execution problem on your part. By the way, the Lions, I think, had 5 or 6, but Miami was sloppy and they still won. That bugged me. Back to Pleasant. Good guy, nice guy, easy to like. I think we all saw on Hard Knocks that he was a guy who was very hands-on type of defensive backs coach, specifically cornerbacks coach. Very likable personality. And I think that's where a lot of people are getting caught here, in that they liked him personally and they projected that, oh, we see what he's teaching pretty well, and like it looks like he's doing a good job in training camp and in preseason. In the season, it hasn't been there. And this is something that I tweeted out. I don't have it in front of me, so I won't quote it, but to paraphrase, Aubrey Pleasant's best feature as a coach is being a teacher and developer of talent. And outside of Jeff Okudah coming back and being better than ever, being better than expected, there hasn't been development. Like Amani Oruwariye has gotten worse. A.J. Parker has gotten worse. Will Harris, I won't say he's gotten worse, but he hasn't really gotten better than what we saw last season when he finished the year at corner. You're not seeing it from the guys like Bobby Price, who's now injured, Ifeadi Melifonwu, who's now injured and technically playing safety anyways. Most of what Pleasant did was working with the cornerbacks, but also working with Aaron Glenn in designing the coverage schemes as the passing game coordinator. And neither of those were going well for him. And when your best asset is developing players and the players that you're working with aren't developing and the results aren't there, it's an easy decision to fire him. Look, people are talking about scapegoating. I have a different understanding of what scapegoating is, or I think you're wrong on that. Look, they're terrible on pass defense. They're specifically terrible at what Pleasant was assigned to do and to coach. I don't understand the logic of defending a guy who wasn't performing well at his job. Like, isn't there supposed to be recourse if you're failing at your job? Wouldn't you want him to be fired? Like, I don't get this. Oh my God, the sky is falling because we fired Aubrey Pleasant. No, he wasn't coaching well. Like, he wasn't performing well. It's nothing personal. He just had to do better at his job, and he didn't. They gave him chances to do better at his job. He didn't. You have seen defensive improvement since the bye week from what Aaron Glenn's schemes have done. You've seen improvement from the defensive line. You've seen improvement from the linebackers. Real quick diversion here. Alex Anzalone just played the best game of his life against Miami. Didn't help the Lions win at all. Rodrigo was good too. The linebackers were actually the strength of the Lions defense last week. I'm waiting for the Thunderbolt to strike me down on that one. But they actually played pretty well. It didn't matter because the defensive backs under Pleasant's tutelage specifically were just terrible. They were unable to do what Aaron Glenn asked of them in the game design. And this is something, look, AG said it last week. We're going to get our hands on these guys. We're not going to let them run free. What happened all game? They missed or they didn't try to do what AG specifically asked them to do. Who's the fall guy for that? The guy who's in charge, Aubrey Pleasant. Like, it's not that complicated, folks. Look, I hate it for the guy. I like him personally. He had to go. Like, you can't keep doing the same thing defensively as bad as they are and not have somebody pay for their sins of football. And look, Aubrey did it. Are they going to get better because he's gone? I don't know. I hope so. I do think that Brian Duker has done a better job with the safeties and the development of guys like Kirby Joseph, Juju Hughes. I think that's, I think Deshaun Elliott has played well when he's been on the field. Unfortunately, he wasn't available this past week. And the integration between the safeties and the linebackers, I think, has gotten specifically quite a bit better since the bye week. And that's credit to Calvin Shepard. That's credit to AG for sort of figuring out what his guys do well and what they don't do well. And I do think they've done a better job of that since the bye week. Obviously, the results aren't there. The wins aren't there. But they're not going to get those without improvement. And you are seeing some improvement in those areas. You were not seeing it at cornerback. And that's the long and the short of why Aubrey is gone. So I do expect him to land on his feet somewhere. I wish him nothing but the best. I don't want to sound cliche like that, like Dan Campbell talking about TJ Hockenson. But, look, and this goes back to Hard Knocks. And it's been brought up by a few different things, and it came up in the Patreon Slack again. The unexpected negative consequences of Hard Knocks are that, one of them anyways, is that we all fell in love with the coaching staff. Everybody around the country did. I think people saw Dan Campbell in a different light, and they saw the assistant coaches doing really solid work at what you do in training camp and what you do in preseason, which is cobble together lineups, develop talent, coach up players. They're very good at that. Monday through Saturday, the Lions have a really good coaching staff, but in terms of designing game plans, in terms of in-game adjustments, that's where Dan Campbell specifically, but also some of his assistants, they're just not good at that yet. Will they ever get good at it? We damn well better hope so, because they're going to be here for a while. But I think Hard Knocks sort of like it stilted the opinion there. It gave us an unfair bias for them. You can be biased against things, but you can also be biased for things. And I think a lot of us, and I'm probably guilty of it, and I'm probably also guilty of fanning those flames, and I'll take responsibility for that. I think we got too excited about what we saw from Hard Knocks and too overly optimistic. The Kool-Aid was flowing a little too fast for what the talent dictates and for what the key part of coaching. Yeah, it's great that they are players are legitimately getting better at most positions across this team. They really are. And dealing with all the injuries that they've had and the shuffling in and out of the lineups, I do think actually the Lions have done obviously they're not winning, but I think they've done an okay job at that. It's coming up with team-specific game plans. It's coming up with, okay, Miami is doing this. We have to do this to stop that, or we need to do this to attack it. I don't think that the Lions do that well, and that includes Ben Johnson, who tends to be the most well-received of the position coaches or coordinators. I don't think that they adapt on Sundays in-game very well, and for me, that's my biggest question that I want to see for the rest of this season. Can Dan Campbell continue to evolve and improve as an in-game, game day, game plan coach? Because right now, that's a massive, just really, really big hole in his repertoire. And it's showing. And that's, you cannot survive long as a coach, no matter how good you are Monday through Saturday, if you cannot get the results that you need on Sunday. And we are not getting those results, and some of that's on Dan. Some of it's on Ben Johnson. Some of it's on Aaron Glenn. Some of it's on the position coaches for not having the players ready. But I think that the biggest issue that right now, aside from the overall lack of talent, and look, they're going into every game where the other team 1 through 53 is better than them. Every game the rest of the season. That includes the Bears. That includes the Panthers. Those teams have better, deeper rosters because that's just where the Lions are. And another thing with Hard Knocks, and this is another secondary consequence of that, I think we overestimated our own talent and depth a little bit. And look, that happens every time in Hard Knocks. I went through that with the Browns, where people thought that, what was his name? Damon Giuseppe, the return man, had a great story, slept in his car as he drove to Cleveland to try out for the team and made it. Guys like Carl Nassib, who's bounced around the league now, they thought that they were going to be a lot better because they liked them. They were charismatic stars of Hard Knocks. And I think outside of Rodrigo and maybe Hutchinson, a lot of the guys that maybe perked up in our minds and in the national view and Lions fans' view of what this team was, I think a lot of those guys got a little bit overestimated as to how good they can be on the football field because of what we saw from Hard Knocks. And look, that's human nature. I'm not going to get on you if you liked what you saw from a guy like Tracy Walker before he got hurt because of what he did on Hard Knocks, or that just happens, and that's unfortunate, but we learn from that, and hopefully we move on from that and have a more realistic calibration of what we have talent-wise. Obviously, the injuries are just devastating with all we've had. A couple other points that have come up in the last week, and these got touched on in the Slack, and I wanted to hit those, but they're newsworthy. First off was this is one that I do want to address this because this got brought up in the podcast topics section. One of the things that I talked about this summer when we were doing Hard Knocks was the concept that not all players who were good last year are going to keep getting better as the year goes forward. Sometimes guys hit their peak. Sometimes guys have a hiccup, great season, and then they regress. And it's tough to know who that's going to be, and it's tough to depend on all those guys being as good as they were. Amani's a great example. Amani played pretty well last year. Was a ball hawk. I thought he played the best run defense of his career as well, which had been a massive deficiency before and since. I think a lot of us expected Amani from 2021 to carry over into 2022. It hasn't happened. I think a lot of us expected the nice showing that we saw from Will Harris at the end of last year at cornerback, where he legitimately did play pretty well, hasn't happened. He hasn't been awful. He's been better at corner than he has been at safety, but that's a freaking low bar, man. We saw, I think we all expected Frank Ragnow to come back and be the all-pro center that he looked like before he was gone. He hasn't been that. That's one of the things that I think has been a little bit quietly overlooked by a lot of people. Frank Ragnow's not having a great year. This year, he's an average center. The Lions can't have an average center with the offense that they have. They can't have first-round picks be average players. That's kind of one of the reasons why TJ Hockenson is out. That's one of the reasons why they are where they are, because they used premium picks on non-premium positions like center, and they're not getting the results that they need from that. Look, he's been fine, but he was better in the past. And I think, Penei Sewell did not have a good game Sunday. I think his development, while in general has been a very pleasant, arc, I think he's plateaued a little bit. He hasn't played that great in 2 of the last 3 games. Now, in between those, he sandwiched what was probably the best game of his career against Dallas. I thought he was phenomenal there, specifically working against Micah Parsons, who might be the most impactful defensive player in the game. I thought Penei did very well. But we're looking at, and I think this is a lesson to look at in the future, when we're looking at guys who stepped up this season and are playing better than you expected, or we're expecting their growth to continue. A guy like Kirby is a good example. Rodrigo. I'm trying to think of more of a veteran presence. I guess Jonah Jackson would be one, although he's been pretty solid this year. Maybe Taylor Decker, maybe a guy like Brock Wright, who's in his 2nd season, is going to get a lot more opportunities to show what he can do. He might show out for the rest of the year. He might average what Hawkinson did. That'd be great. But then we're going to expect it next year. And I don't know if Brock Wright can keep that up with an offseason where people understand because he's played more, they're going to know exactly what he does well, what he doesn't do, how to attack him a little bit better, maybe how to make him less comfortable in the role that he's in. And I think that's something that we need to keep an eye on in terms of players who don't necessarily project to get a lot better or continue their developmental arc as we go forward. So I wanted to address that one. Thanks to, I forget who noted it. I didn't write that down. Sorry. But anyways, that was one of the things. A couple of things. Jameson Williams, it sounds like he's not going to play on Thanksgiving. That was the timeline that I was given personally from people inside the building not more than a month ago. They were targeting him coming back and playing very limited role, by the way. That's what the Lions do. And you saw that with DeAndre Swift Sunday. You've seen it with Jerry Jacobs not playing on defense. They're not going to rush guys coming off of injuries back into prominent roles. They're going to spoon feed them. We didn't see Jerry at all on defense against Miami. That's them being overly cautious with a player that they believe is a big part of their future, and they don't want to aggravate or risk that. I do expect to see Jerry more going forward, but you're not going to see him. He's not going to be starting. He's not going to be playing 50 snaps a game. He's going to be playing 15 to 25, and they're going to sort of cherry pick when they can use it to make him get more comfortable in what he's doing. That was what I thought they were going to do with Jameson Williams. Like starting on Thanksgiving, you got a 10-day recovery period after that. Let him go out there, let him play 10 to 12 pass routes. Throw him a couple of deep balls just to show the fans at home and in Ford Field like what they've got. That's out now. Dan Campbell said he wasn't playing for about another month. That takes us into December. He said that last week. Look, Dan Campbell has always been a man of his word when he says things like this, so I do expect Jameson Williams to play. I don't have any information that says that he will or won't, other than what Dan said. I think that expecting, like, if he's on your fantasy team and it's not a dynasty league, you can cut him. He's not going to be a primary target when he comes back. I do want to see him get on the field. I want to see him and how the interplay that he has with Amon-Ra St. Brown and whoever is playing tight end, James Mitchell, hopefully. Want to see him if he's comfortable with Goff. Want to see what he does for Goff. We're gonna debate Jared Goff and his future endlessly over the next few months. I'm not going to get into that here because that's something where there's plenty of time to deal with Jared Goff in the situation with that. But I would like to see how well Goff plays with a guy like Jameson Williams, a true vertical threat on the field who has some size but also has the ability to make a short gain into a long gain with runs after the catch because he's such a dynamic athlete. I want to see how that works. And if that's something that we need to see from Jared Goff to make a decision on him, I think that's something that is imperative that the Lions do play Jameson Williams at the end of the year. Again, even if it's only 15 to 20 snaps a game, just to get him out there, just to get him used to the speed of the game, the flow of the game, how much more faster and physical the NFL game is from what he played at Alabama. That's important. I think that helps him a lot going into the second season. And to me, that is worth the smaller risk of injury re-aggravation that they keep mitigating by pushing that start time back. So I do want to see that. I'm a little disappointed that we're not going to see him on Halloween or Thanksgiving. By the way, I always transpose Halloween and Thanksgiving. I did it like 35 times Monday night. One of those weird things that I just can't process. It happens. So I do want to see that. One other note that I had here, and that was on, what is it here? Oh, drafting a backup quarterback. This is something that someone in the Slack brought up to me privately. I am for drafting multiple quarterbacks, actually. Not to bury Goff or anything, but I think that if you're in position to have the number one pick, I think your quarterback has probably answered the question whether he's your long-term solution or not in that situation, especially when it's his second season and they did upgrade the offensive line around him. I would take one number one. I would also take one later. I absolutely would. The Robert Griffin III Kirk Cousins situation, where Kirk Cousins wound up being the better pick as the fourth rounder. I don't know if I'd take a fourth rounder, but fifth, sixth. Look, right now your backup quarterback is Nate Sudfeld, who was available for peanuts from San Francisco, and Tim Boyle, who you cut. That's your quarterback roster right now. Both those guys, by the way, are free agents at the end of the season. I want options. I want long-term options, and I want a little bit of insurance just in case they take C.J. Stroud, Bryce Young, Will Levis. Although I don't think that dog hunts anymore as a number one pick or number two pick. By the way, I am fully resigned to the fact that the Lions will have the number one or number two pick. I do think they still get to 3, possibly 4 wins, but I do think that's still either the worst or second worst in the league. My Texans not looking very strong with where they're at. They're probably going to get 1 or 2 more wins. The Raiders are a rotting piñata, and that's by the way, just to diverge a little bit in the around the league category. Josh McDaniels is a rotten, terrible head coach. He proved it in Denver, went back to New England, rebuilt his name. After 8 games in Las Vegas, they're like, oh my God, this guy, like, what have we done? What have we done? So maybe sometimes it's a good reminder that sometimes the hot coaching candidate or the one that you really want isn't going to work out. I think a lot of people in Detroit know that from Matt Patricia already, but this is further reinforcement of that. So I'm a fan of Max Duggan from TCU. He comes from the Sonny Dykes offense. Those of you who studied the draft a long time might remember Sonny Dykes was the coach at California when Jared Goff was there. It's a precision-based offense. It's a lot of predetermined reads, predetermined route combinations that the quarterback, picks one of the best 2 from. Well, Duggan has proven to be very good at that. He is the most accurate quarterback in the country at the college level right now for TCU. And that's not something that he necessarily showed early on in his career. When he started at TCU, and his first couple seasons with the Frogs, he was more of a gunslinger, scrambler type of guy. What I like about Duggan as a 4th, 5th round pick is the fact that he hasn't lost those tendencies, but he's also acclimated into the more structured system. And he's a guy who can proven now that he can make the plays in structure, but he does have some ability with his legs, with his arm, with his improvisational skills to make plays out of structure. I like that. That's something that I wish that Jared Goff was better at. That's just not what he does. That's not what he's ever done. So I'm not opposed at all to taking two quarterbacks. Look, I know that they need defensive help, but as I've said many times, if you don't have the quarterback, nothing else matters. I don't know if Jared Goff is going to be the long-term quarterback. I kind of don't think he will be. But you need to have as many options on the table as you can to solve your quarterback issue. Whether they think that it's going to be Goff, whether they think that it's going to be Stroud or Young, or whether they're going to bring somebody else in later, like Duggan or a couple other later-round quarterbacks. Cameron Ward from Washington State is going to go high. Probably shouldn't. He is sort of this year's Malik Willis. A little bit more accurate, but not necessarily as good few are as good at running as Malik Willis is. I continue to wish him well. I watched his first start, broke that down for Tennessee. I'll just say this. Thank God he had Derrick Henry because he wasn't good. Missed a couple of very easy throws of the 10 that he made. And didn't necessarily light the world on fire with his legs like I think a lot of us thought he would. Look at his first start. I get that. But that's your Malik Willis watch. A guy like that who presents the things that Malik Willis made appealing, a guy like Anthony Richardson makes appealing, the quarterback from Florida, are things that I hope that they look for in the next quarterback. I'm tired of Jared Goff being a guy that can't make he can't make a cake unless all the ingredients are there for him. Like he's not going to be able to substitute an egg white with something else. He's got to have all the ingredients laid out, and that's a difficult way to execute in the NFL when you're not as athletic and don't necessarily have the arm talent that a lot of other guys do, and that's where Jared Goff is. So I wanted to address that one. Look, I've talked long enough. I actually did this all in one take. I'm pretty proud of that. We're at, 36 and a half minutes here. I've talked at you long enough. Enjoy the weekend. Enjoy the Lions. Look, they're playing the Packers this weekend. The Packers are a train wreck. They are moving in the wrong direction. As I told another podcast that I did this morning, they are sinking into the ground looking for the nails in their coffin, and Aaron Rodgers has the hammer in his hand. This is going to be a very interesting game because this is one of those where if the Lions can somehow rise up and make it happen, and by the way, I do think that they have the ability to win this game if they play consistently on offense, if Goff doesn't make mistakes, and if the defensive backs respond even just a little bit to the change in the coaching culture, they can win this game. Green Bay is vulnerable. They're injured. Their offensive line isn't very good. Their defense is not playing nearly as well as they want. They've been ravaged by injuries. This is a game that the Lions can win. Do I expect them to win? No, I don't. But it's going to be very interesting to see the reaction around the league and specifically in Green Bay if the Lions do win this game. And I kind of want that because I sort of like the chaos in the NFC North. That would be a lot of fun. And it would put the Lions, believe it or not, just one game behind the Packers. And look, the Bears threw up the white flag just as Justin Fields starts to play well. They trade away Roquan Smith and Robert Quinn. They're done. The division is Minnesota's. Unfortunately, that week 3 game, week 2. Whenever we played Minnesota, we had the big lead. Couldn't close that game out. Oh, how different the story of both the Lions and the Vikings and the entire NFC North would be if Dan Campbell coached that game better in-game on Sunday and they executed that game better. We'd be having a lot of different conversations right now, I suspect, but we are where we are because things are where they are at. This is one of the 3 worst teams in football, and they have the record to show it. Don't expect that to change, folks. I'll echo what Chris said on the podcast that he did, the clip that he shot from his hotel room. Look, it's a long year. We've been through these before. I've been through way too many of these in covering the different teams that I do. It's frustrating. It's long. I'm going to get cross with you at times on social media. I'm going to get cross with you in the Slack at times. I'm tired. Guys, I'm tired. It's really, really hard to try and even cover the team like rationally. Like, it's hard to not just think, oh my God, we suck so bad. I wrote about that in this week's 10 cents at Real GM Football. Please check that out. The 10th cent was written primarily to explain how I go through my job without, taking drugs or ending my existence, covering the Lions and the Browns for a living in this day and age. And the interactions that I have with fans, look, most of you are great. I appreciate those interactions. I appreciate the support. Chris and I appreciate the support you're giving the podcast. By the way, click that like button. Do it. Click the subscribe button so you know when we're doing spontaneous things like this where we're kind of off schedule too. It does help out and helps the algorithms, and we'll let you know when we're on so we can do more of these sort of things. Game previews coming later this week. I believe Scott Bischoff and Chris are getting that together. Look for that on Friday. Go Lions. Let's hope for a win. Hope that we see some progress and some good things, and we have some pleasant things to talk about as we look into where, unfortunately, as the calendar turns to November, our discussions turn to the draft. Thanks.